With the Switch currently in its 7th fiscal year, everyone is anticipating the announcement of the next Nintendo console, the heavily rumored Switch 2. And with all the talk that's going around, it seems like the only one not currently talking is Nintendo, yet virtually everyone acknowledges that a successor to the Switch does exist and will be announced soon. So today, I want to go over what we do know about the next Nintendo Switch so far. We're going to be going over what we've heard from Nintendo, all the leaks and speculation, and my own personal thoughts. All that's going to be covered in this video. Chapters will be available down in the time bar if you want to jump around, so let's get right into it. It seems like a successor to the Switch has been rumored since the Switch itself was even announced. For a long time, many people thought we could get a Switch Pro, similar to something like the PS4 Pro or the new 3DS XL. This would offer updated graphical power and maybe even some new Joy-Cons, but since the OLED was released, it's become more apparent that the next console Nintendo announces will most likely be an entirely new one, meaning it has different hardware, different games, and likely a brand new gimmick or two. However, considering how successful the Switch has been and how much money it's made for Nintendo, it seems extremely unlikely that Nintendo drops the concept of the Switch entirely. Even if it's not called a Switch at all, Nintendo knows that the fact that the Switch is a hybrid console has heavily contributed to its sales, and the common consensus is that the ability to play games both in handheld and on the TV is here to stay. That is why this next console, even though it doesn't actually yet have a name, is often referred to as the Switch 2. Even if it's a new console, the primary gimmick will remain. So all of this begs the question, when can we expect to hear about this console from Nintendo? Well, the answer is impossible to say for sure, but most likely it's gonna be really soon. Here's why. Now, the main reason I believe the Switch successor is not only going to happen, but is also happening in the very near future is simply the fact that it's due. We know Nintendo's inevitably going to create new hardware because they can't rely on the sales of the dated Switch forever. I mean, the majority of potential Switch buyers already own one. There simply aren't enough Switch sales to justify keeping it on the shelves versus making a new console. Not to mention, the Switch is Nintendo's only system on the market currently. For decades, Nintendo would sell both a home console and a handheld at the same time. However, the Switch's hybrid nature has ended this tradition, meaning as the Switch's sales drop, there's really nothing else on the market that could be making up for those lost sales. Nintendo has also clearly acknowledged that there is going to be a next console, with their CEO Doug Bowser actually stating in early 2020 that he believed the Switch was at the midpoint of its life cycle. This projection was in line with the typical lifespan of a Nintendo console, which has consistently been 5 to 6 years. Ironically, that midpoint wasn't even halfway into the Switch's current lifespan, which is now nearing 7 years. However, considering the Switch's already crazy sales exploded again midway through its life due to an unexpected pandemic, it makes sense that the Switch's life would be expanded. But in recent years, Switch sales have continued to decline, pointing to the reality that a new console is more and more due as the years pass. Another reason why I think a Switch 2 is coming soon is Nintendo's upcoming lineup of games. This has been one of the best years on the Switch. Games like Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder are all huge titles that redefine their respective genres. However, after Mario Wonder drops, there really aren't any major first-party releases. If you watched the recent Nintendo Direct, this might seem like a ludicrous claim with how many games were shown off, but a lot of those games are ports and remakes. Thousand Year Door Remake, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Super Mario RPG, Mario vs. Donkey Kong. A lot of these are really great titles that will certainly be pleasing to fans, but these games also don't take the amount of effort that completely original games do, since they can just borrow from games that already exist. I'm not saying this to dog on these remakes at all. I'm just pointing out that Nintendo is perhaps putting more effort into original games that they are planning to launch with a future console, simply because original titles tend to have more of a significant impact on console sales because they're one of the things that make these consoles unique. These remakes actually remind me a lot of the 3DS's lineup as Nintendo slowly stopped offering support for it. I mean, in both cases, we're getting a port for a Luigi's Mansion game, multiple remakes of Mario RPGs, a new WarioWare title. I mean, it's almost like poetry.
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Honestly, it just makes sense that this would be the Switch's lineup if we're getting a new console, because a new console would require some solid launch titles in order to have a chance to match the Switch's success. The Wii U failed despite the Wii's success because a lot of people found it indistinguishable from the Wii, and it had a very weak lineup of games at launch, which certainly didn't help. Even if the next console is a Switch 2, if it releases alongside major new titles like Mario Kart 9, maybe a new Smash Bros, Metroid Prime 4, people will buy it just to play these games alone, even if it doesn't have a brand new gimmick as revolutionary as the jump from the Wii U to the Switch. So yeah, just considering what is happening with the Switch right now, you can logically deduce that a new console is coming, and probably fairly soon. However, it's also worth considering leaks, cause, well, there's a lot of them. So here's the deal with leaks. Nothing is absolute until it's announced. Because of this, every leak should be taken with either a grain or a whole shaker of salt. Sure, if Nintendo somehow accidentally uploaded a first look at the Nintendo Switch 2 trailer to their YouTube channels, that would be a leak you would probably not question at all. But when it comes to the Switch 2 leaks so far, it's almost always just one or two sources, some journalist, or some guy saying they've heard things about the next Nintendo console. The only way to really measure the credibility of these leaks is based on the track record of the person sharing it. And even people who have decent track records can also just make educated guesses or straight up get lucky. Guessing correctly one time or a few times doesn't make you a prophet. For instance, in this video, I've already shown why it's pretty obvious that a new Nintendo console that also has the hybrid gimmick is getting announced fairly soon. It's just reasonable to assume that considering where Nintendo's at currently. It feels like a lot of leakers know that and then just throw a bunch of extra stuff on top of it, saying that they have a credible source when that's not the case. With that being said, I'm gonna go over some of the more popular and credible leaks and share a few of my thoughts on them, breaking down just how realistic and credible they are. The first leak is that if you aren't subscribed to this channel, Donkey Kong will come to your house with a banana gun and kill you. This leak is 100% credible because only 5% of our viewers are subscribed. There's about to be an absolute banana massacre. Make sure to click that subscribe button so you're not one of the victims. But actually now, one of the most prominent leaks going around has come from Activision. This actually comes from Microsoft's court case against the FTC when they're trying to acquire the company. According to The Verge, an email from Activision's head of platform strategy and partners relations was used in the case, and it detailed a bit of information about Nintendo's next console. It's referred to as the NG Switch, which is assumed to be the next generation Switch, and the email basically says that the next Switch will have similar performance to the PS4 and Xbox One. Activision's CEO also confirmed that the company met with Nintendo in December of 2022 to discuss getting games onto their next console. This leak is as believable as it gets. Unless Activision was just straight up lying in an email that then came to light in court to be used as evidence, it's very, very highly likely that this is true. It is fair to say though that the performance might sound a little disappointing. The base PS4 and Xbox One came out 10 years ago now, and having a similar performance to those consoles doesn't sound too impressive. But the Switch can already play games in full HD. It really feels like a console like this would pretty much just make up for all the Switch's shortcomings. We'd get smoother frame rates and faster load times, but frankly, those aren't massive enough changes for a new console. However, we don't know for sure. The email itself doesn't even list off any specific specs, with the exact phrasement being closer alignment to Gen 8 platforms in terms of performance and our previous offerings on PS4 and Xbox One. This is also based off information given to Activision in 2022, which very well could be dated at this point. The main things I'd take away from this are that the next Nintendo console has been in development since at least 2022, and it will be way more powerful than Nintendo's current console. None of this is very surprising. The next leak I want to go over is definitely to be taken with a grain of salt, but it is one of the more prominent leaks. According to an article by Eurogamer, it is claimed that at a Gamescom event, Nintendo recently showed off a new console and tech demo behind closed doors. Obviously, this was shown to developers. It was private, not public. The tech demo was a souped-up version of Breath of the Wild that boasted 4K resolution, locked 60 FPS, and no load times, basically just showing the console's improved graphics and RAM. The claim is that the Switch is able to produce 4K visuals through DLSS. DLSS is a tool used by NVIDIA graphics cards that uses AI to upscale every single frame that your graphics card puts out. Basically, you can get a 4K output with the Switch only having to render a 1080p picture. That's a bit of a simplification, but DLSS is the best way for Nintendo to get a 4K output out of the Switch without using a graphics card that's 4 times the size of the Switch. As I mentioned before, DLSS technology also comes from NVIDIA, and they are currently the chip manufacturer that the base Nintendo Switch uses, so this is more than possible. Now, this report from Eurogamer was backed up by a few well-known leakers in the gaming industry like Nate the Hate. However, what I think is the most interesting about this is that the article was retweeted by Pyoro. For those who don't know, this is the most accurate leaker when it comes to Nintendo information right now. Quite legitimately, everything he tweets seems to come true. He leaked that Mario Wonder was getting announced, including the name and the fact that there were elephants, caterpillars, all that stuff. He leaked F-Zero 99, the exact name for Princess Peach Showtime, Mario vs. Donkey Kong Remake, and so much more. As of right now, he's gotten nothing wrong, so he's by far the most reliable leaker we know. However, I'm not gonna pretend like this confirms these rumors at all because it's just a retweet. Overall, I do think that the Switch that was described is definitely a possibility, especially if it really did utilize a new NVIDIA chip with the DLSS feature. A Switch like that could boast a good amount of power and also be somewhat affordable, so like I said, it's possible. Now that we've covered some of the supposed leaks, what do I think we can expect from a Switch 2? Considering how this console will shape up compared to the Switch, it's worth considering what I've dubbed the Wii U dilemma. Basically, when Nintendo is coming off a massively successful console like the Wii, so it would make sense for Nintendo to want to keep the same gimmick that the last console had. However, the Wii U kept the motion controls and it ended up being Nintendo's worst performing console ever, so obviously they want to avoid making the same mistake twice. Let's be honest, the Switch 2 doesn't need to end up selling as well as the Switch has, as in order to do that, it would have to be Nintendo's best-selling console ever. It still, however, should be able to perform well and ride a lot of the momentum that the Switch will leave behind. So now let's go over what I want and expect to see on a Nintendo Switch 2, taking the Wii U's failure into account and explaining how different decisions would benefit Nintendo's next console. Okay, the big question on everyone's mind, graphical capabilities. It's obvious that the next Switch will have some form of upgraded graphics, it's just a matter of how upgraded these graphics will actually be. Can we really expect a 4K Switch to release? It's certainly possible, but I don't know if the Switch 2 exactly needs 4K. I guess the thing everyone's wondering is what makes this a Switch 2 rather than a Switch Pro? 4K visuals would absolutely make this a new console. Being able to lock in the majority of games at 1080p 60 FPS with Nvidia's upscaling bringing that up to 4K would definitely be a major feature. Something that's a no-brainer for the next console is backwards compatibility. I understand why the Switch didn't have it because it's basically impossible, but if we're getting a Switch-esque console, this needs to be a feature. With backwards compatibility through both a cartridge slot and downloads, the Switch 2 would have an entire console's library of games at launch, and there's really no excuse for it not existing. Well, I can think of one excuse.
Money!
Plus, with the upgraded tech, the new Switch might be able to improve the performance of past Switch games. We could get upgraded visuals or better frame rates for games you already own. That would be incredible. Alright, now let's talk about the new controllers. Personally, I don't think a new Switch really needs new controllers, and since Joy-Con are already like $80, it would suck to have to buy new ones. Maybe we get a brand new controller with some slight tweaks. However, the Joy-Con we have now have Bluetooth in them, so they should be able to connect to a new console regardless. There's no specific feature I feel like the new controllers need, but the one thing I'll note is Joy-Con drift has gotta go. It's been far too long, and even if we're just getting the same old Joy-Con, Nintendo needs to solve the drift problem with the controllers we already have. If Nintendo wants to successfully enter a new era, it's time to put Joy-Con drift to rest. Seriously. When it comes to Nintendo Switch Online, some changes are definitely in order. The online service has always been lackluster, and people have been begging for something like rollback netcode and dedicated servers for years. Do I think that'll happen though? Not at all. Our best bet is that Nintendo includes an Ethernet port in the dock like with the OLED. I would not be surprised if the service functions basically the same, especially since Nintendo has said that they want the account transfer to be as smooth for current Switch owners as possible. Hopefully the console launches with all the same features we already have, like NES, SNES, N64 Online. Maybe we get some new games added to the library or a new 99 game, but I'm really not counting on much at this point. Online just does not seem to be a major priority for Nintendo. Here we go, new games. One of the reasons the Wii U failed is because it had a weak launch, since New Super Mario Bros. U isn't the hugest console seller in the world. However, I think the 3DS offers a better example at this. The 3DS was a successful console, but not at launch. Their big launch titles were Pilot Wings Resort, Steel Diver, and Nintendogs plus Cats. Oh, I'm gonna throw up, that's disgusting. Eventually though, games like Mario Kart 7, a new 3D Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Animal Crossing, Kirby, all these franchises we know and love made their way to the 3DS, and sales started to rise, making it ultimately sell over 75 million units. If the Nintendo Switch 2 wants to distinguish itself from the Switch, it needs big, must-play titles from the start. Games like Mario Kart 9, a new 3D Mario, a new Smash, a new Animal Crossing, these would sell consoles because they're the games that people buy Nintendo consoles for. Especially with the amount of ports in the lineup right now, I think the amount of big games we're going to get within the first year of the Switch 2 should be similar to 2017 in the first year of the Switch. I mean, frankly, it needs it. Finally, I want to go over what the price of the next Switch should be. Honestly, I would not be surprised if this console is around $400, which is definitely a bit steep for a Nintendo console. However, if we're getting the console handheld hybrid with potential 4K capabilities, I think that's fairly reasonable. The OLED is already around $350, so it's not a crazy price jump from that, and with the Xbox Series X and PS5 being both $500, a $400 portable that can play similar games would look reasonably priced. $400 is basically the golden number, because while consumers have gotten used to higher prices over the years, it's still more affordable than some of the other options. I think the true dream here though is $350. Imagine after the holiday season, once Nintendo's squeezed out as many Switch sales as they can, they permanently drop the base Switch to $250 and the OLED to $300. Then we end up getting a Switch 2 for $350 down the line. That could be electric, although it might not be feasible depending on how much innovation and new tech they're putting into this console. As far as for the games, I wouldn't be shocked to see first-party Nintendo games start to go for $70. We saw this with Tears of the Kingdom, and while I don't think this will be the norm for Switch games going forward, I could definitely see it happening with some of the Switch 2's bigger titles. Okay, so now all you're left to wonder is, when can we actually expect the Switch 2 to release? Well, the answer is, I don't know for sure. However, most people, including myself, seem to think that it'll be released in 2024. While I'm not too big on rumors, I think Nintendo's lineup of games points to this. The amount of ports we're getting suggests to me that something new is brewing, and I would not be too surprised if it's a new console. We could perhaps see it get a holiday 2024 release, but to be honest, I think a summer or fall release makes the most sense. This would allow the console to launch in, say, July, and then have many months of new games under its belt leading up to the holiday season. Take a look at the base Switch, for example. It released in March of 2017, but throughout the entire first year of the Switch, it felt like every month or so there was some kind of new major first-party Nintendo release. A late spring, early summer release might be perfect for this reason. They can save some releases for later in the year, and also have a decent library of games by that holiday. As far as when this would get announced, I have no clue. Nintendo just kinda shadow dropped the Switch's trailer some random day in fall of 2016, and hey, I mean, it worked out. I think the only reason they might want to hold off on an announcement for now is because they're still trying to sell the Switch units. We also have games like Mario Wonder releasing, so it doesn't make a ton of sense to announce a console right before a big release when sales are always expected to rise. I also don't think they'd want to announce it right before the holidays, so early next year is my best bet, but who knows? We could get an announcement tomorrow or 2 years from now with just how random Nintendo is. Anyways, that's everything we know about the Nintendo Switch 2, considering as little as we actually do know. With that out of the way, if you enjoyed this longer video, I got one even longer for you. Over 200 new Mario Kart 8 Deluxe features, or hey, for Mario Kart 9 on the Switch 2. That video is crazy good. It's one of my favorite videos I've ever made. It's on the screen right now. Click it. Thanks for watching.